Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council's online briefing for faith leaders. In today's program, we discuss ministering to the spiritual and religious development of university students. The San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefings are supported by a grant from MetaFund. Thank you. The important ongoing work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council would not be possible without generous funding from congregations, corporations, faith-based social service agencies, foundations, judicatories, and supporters like you. Help us spread the word. Visit sfinterfaithcouncil.org to learn about SFIC programming and how to become a supporter. Follow SFIC on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to SFIC's YouTube channel to watch all of our virtual events. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the presenter for their review. To activate closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. Everyone vaccinated and unvaccinated still must mask on public transportation, in healthcare settings, congregate settings, long-term care facilities, and recommended in K-12 schools and childcare settings. This also includes some city buildings. As of Friday, March 11th, the San Francisco will not require proof of vaccination to enter restaurants, bars, gyms, and other settings where food and drink is consumed or elevated breathing occurs. Businesses can decide to be more restrictive and may require masks. The vaccines are safe and effective. Go to sf.gov to find a vaccine site or vaccine event in your neighborhood. Now is the time to come together, San Francisco. Together we can stop Asian discrimination, bias, hate, and violence. The COVID-19 virus has no race or nationality. It is simply a disease. To report a hate crime, call the SFPD at 415-553-1133. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey, and thank you for facilitating this conversation from Bangkok. I think that this is going to be the first international briefing that we are offering. Again, my name is Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to the 75th online briefing for faith leaders. A student's university education is not confined to the curriculum imparted by professors in the classroom, but also extends to the intense lived life experiences on campus. An oftentimes overlooked dimension of a student's formation is their spiritual and religious development. This week's online briefing for faith leaders, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council, welcomes University of San Francisco Director of University Ministry, Angelica Quinonez, and San Francisco State University Associate Vice President for Equity and Community, Frederic Smith, who will discuss the complexities, joys, and challenges of student life and interfaith programs in higher education at their respective universities. As well, they will share their thoughts on building community, supporting students during the pandemic, and exploring the intersectionality of faith and student development. At this time, it is my joy and privilege to welcome the chairman of the board of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Nancy Nielsen, to offer a few words of welcome, as well as to read the interfaith statement that is read at the beginning of each of our programs. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Michael. And once again, it is indeed a joy to be with all of you. and to once again read the interfaith statement that we share at every gathering as a reminder of who we are in this community. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. Welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. And to ground us in a reflective moment, we are very, very privileged to have with us Reverend Tova Green of the San Francisco Zen Center. Tova, welcome, and we look forward to your reflection.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good morning, everyone. I just a little introduction about myself. I'm a Zen Buddhist priest. I reside and work at San Francisco Zen Center, and I grew up in a secular Jewish family in the Bronx in New York City, and became interested in religion when I went to Antioch College, which had a Quaker president. And in large part, it was through friendships with students of other religions that I became very interested in learning more about religion. And my path has embraced both Judaism and Buddhism. So I want to share a couple of teachings of the Buddha about spiritual friendship. The most famous of his teachings about friendship is a story about when the Buddha was walking with his attendant Ananda, and Ananda opened up this question with the Buddha about spiritual friendship, saying, spiritual friendship is half of the holy life. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie. And the Buddha replied, "Don't say that, Ananda, don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk or a nun has friends, companions, and comrades, he or she can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path." And then the Buddha also told his followers to seek out friends with 7 qualities, and I find these qualities relevant today. So a monk or a nun gives what is hard to give. They do what is hard to do. They endure what is hard to endure. They reveal their secrets to you. They keep your secrets. When misfortunes strike, they don't abandon you. When you're down and out, they don't look down on you. A friend endowed with these 7 qualities is worth associating with. And I just want to say that I really see the college years as a great time to be curious about religion, to find friendships and explore religious practices other than the ones we grew up with, and to develop friendships across religions, to explore what's similar, what's different, and going beyond religious tolerance to a deeper level of religious experience. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing our speakers today.
Thank you, Tova. And I'm going to take a cue from your presentation, and they say confession is good for the soul. having grown up in a traditional Greek Orthodox family, when I went off to college, they were lonely times in the beginning, but they were filled in a very unique way. There was a local restaurant there, and every Sunday they would invite the Greek Orthodox students to gather at the corner, and they and their family members would put us in their car and take us a half-hour away to go to services, and then come back to their home and have lunch. They were a very hardworking family, and this was their only day off, and this is how they spent it. And so we received both spiritual food, the love of family, as well as a meal. And to me, that was very foundational and critical at that time, because the small school I went to didn't have the campus ministries that our two presenters will share with us today. Life evolves, and now that university has a very developed campus ministry program, but during those days they didn't. And so I've been looking forward to this program in particular. We are very blessed to have with us Angelica Quinonez, the Director of University Ministry at the University of San Francisco, and Frederic Smith, the Associate Vice President of Equity and Community and Inclusion at San Francisco State University. The San Francisco Interfaith Council has had intense relationships with both of these universities, and they are very much prominent constituents of our council. And so we want to shine a light on them today and let them shine a light on their programs. And so without further ado, I give to you Angelica and Frederic, who will lead us in this presentation, followed by Q&A.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael, for the invitation to be here today. And of course, I'm extending the thank you to the San Francisco Interfaith Council. So as Michael said, my name is Angelica Quinonez. I have the privilege of directing the University Ministry Office at the University of San Francisco. Trey, if you can put the slides up. Great, thank you so much. So a university ministry, we really see our role as journeying together with our students. From the moment they come to our campus as freshmen to the moment that they graduate, and hopefully they come back as alums, and we are able to support them in that way too. But we see our role as journeying with and walking with and alongside our students during their 4 years here. Next slide, please. So in line with the overall mission of the University of San Francisco as a Jesuit Catholic institution, we support the spiritual, religious, and pastoral needs of our entire community. So faculty, staff, and students. And today, of course, we'll focus mostly on students. But our mission at University Ministry is really to be a place of inclusion where we are fully supporting members of our community. So for us, whether a student comes in with a very strong faith tradition or no faith tradition, or they are still seeking and wandering and exploring, we make sure that we have programs that fit all those needs so that students can walk through our doors, can explore university ministry programs, and can feel wholly welcomed, no matter what they bring to the table, no matter what their religious or spiritual identity might be, no matter the different intersecting identities that they have. There is a place for everyone here at University Ministry, even for students of no faith. And we do find that we are also serving that community in many of our programs. Students are wanting programs that will allow them to explore different aspects of their life, to find places of mindfulness and rest, and we are able to provide that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the unique position that USF finds itself in. Yes, we are a Jesuit Catholic institution, but the majority of our students are not Catholic. In fact, the majority of our students are not Christian, right, in its totality. We have nearly 65% of non-Christian identifying students. So we are talking about the 25 distinctly represented traditions that are here, as well as our students students that are from different spiritualities or consider themselves atheist, agnostic, indifferent, or even just non. So we are unique among Catholic schools and even among some of the universities within our Jesuit network, in that we're serving a very diverse population. And so how Catholic universities were in the past, where the majority of their students were Catholic and campus ministry offices were really focusing on that population, we are in a unique and very blessed position to be able to really help with the diversity of the campus community, to be supportive, no matter what walk of life a student is coming from. Next slide, please. So key to all the work that we do is understanding that spiritual and religious development is indeed important for college students. So we know from back in the 1970s, John Fowler talking about the different stages of spiritual development, that students are seeking and they are questioning and they are wondering. And so our office really focuses on being able to nourish that aspect of development. And we know from studies in the past 20 years or so that students do experience a greater sense of belonging on campus and other positive outcomes such as higher academic achievement, retention rates are better, and an overall positive well-being when they feel that they belong on campus, when they feel that their identities are welcomed on campus, when they feel that their stories and their religious belief systems and spiritualities are honored. We also know that students who are nourished both spiritually and religiously, or who have access to those programs on college campuses, do have a higher rate of self-confidence and do find that they have stronger academic and leadership abilities as well. And of course, for the university, when students feel that way, it results in a greater appreciation of the campus climate, as well as satisfaction with the college. And we also know that in spiritual and religious development, students do experience a growth in several dimensions, including the ethic of care, being involved in charitable or volunteer work, being compassionate, increasing in self-love, love for others, a better ecumenical worldview, and greater resilience. And of course, resilience is something that we particularly focused on during the time of the pandemic, when our students were away from community, away from campus, and struggling, as many of us were, to make sense of a world that was in many ways pretty much shut down, right? And it's still something that we're looking at now as we are very much still in the pandemic, but coming out of it, right? So how do we promote within our students resilience, right? And how do we help them take care of themselves in this time? Those are the important questions that are still with us right now. Next slide, please. So these are the program areas that we have at University Ministry. And again, they are open really to all our students. And we find that students, no matter what tradition they come from, do explore different aspects of these programs. So our social justice program is one of our most popular programs. And that, of course, connects with different aspects of the San Francisco community, as well as communities in the Bay Area. We have a tutoring program that goes out into the Mission District. We have another tutoring program that goes out to Half Moon Bay that works with the children of migrant farm workers. Our interfaith programs are strong. Along with that, our affiliated ministries and our Jewish student outreach. We have a rabbi in residence who is amazing. I believe she is on this call, Rabbi Camille Angel, who has really created wonderful programs for our Jewish students and is here to support them, as well as other members of the community. We have great partnerships with our affiliated ministries, with Hillel, InterVarsity, our Greek Orthodox Fellowship, our Muslim student organization, and the newest member of the community is our Sikh student organization, which was born in the fall of this academic year. We have a strong immersions program, which, as you can imagine, was the most impacted during the pandemic. How can you have an immersion when you can't really go anywhere? And I'll talk a little bit about how that sort of transitioned during the pandemic. We have a retreats program that is highly inclusive. We've moved mostly to the online space since the pandemic, but we're happy to report that we had our very first overnight a few days ago. And so that was nice to have. But it's an experience for students to get away from campus, to associate with different members of the community, to have moments of prayer and reflection. Our Queering Religion program is one that does so much on our campus. And again, I want to highlight Rabbi Camille Angel, my colleague here. And within Queering Religion, there are two programs. There's Community and there's Breaking Bread in the Binary. And both of them have given a home to our LGBTQIA students who are also asking questions about the intersection of faith and their LGBTQIA identity. And it is a place where they can come together and they can talk to each other, they can engage, they can have fun and socialize, and also answer those very important questions, and also know that they are loved and accepted by this campus and by so many others. We, of course, as a Catholic institution, have our liturgy and music program and Catholic outreach. That's another program that was highly impacted during the pandemic. The question of how do you take a 2000+ year religion and move some of it online was a challenge for us. We have a faculty and staff spiritual formation program that is led by Father Domo Godfrey, who I know is no stranger to some of you here. And then we have a resident ministry program, which I want to take the time to highlight. We have 15 amazing graduate students that support the work that we do. And in many ways, they keep this office able to serve this community. They come up with so much of the programming that we have, from the brainstorming part of it to the execution. They live in the halls with the students. They are able to support them there pastorally, but also serve as an incredible resource to the student community. So when we're talking about walking with and journeying with students, we are right there in the halls with them, serving them and their needs in as many ways as we possibly can. And these wonderful 15 graduate students represent a number of religious traditions. And so we are better able to serve our students in that capacity. Next slide, please. So here are some of the pandemic challenges. The first one being, how do we disconnect when we need to be connected? So oftentimes in a lot of the programming that we have here at University Ministry, we say, we would love for you to take the time to disconnect in order to connect or reconnect with yourself, with others, with something greater than yourself, whether you call that the divine or God or whatever name you have for that presence. But then the pandemic came, right? And so the very thing that we were always telling students to do, like disconnect from your cell phones, disconnect from anything that keeps you from being mindful and having the time to reflect. Everything that we said you had to disconnect from, we now had to use, we had to utilize, we had to become friends with these tools so that we could be supportive of our students. So the challenge for us was, how do we maintain this disconnection from what's happening and still use these platforms where we're highly connected in order to connect our students to something more meaningful. And so that was the challenge. And I spoke earlier of, some of the programs were very difficult to transition into this online space, immersions being the first one. When the pandemic hit, when we were asked to shut down, a lot of our students were away internationally and domestically at immersions. And so it was a bit of, oh, we're shutting down, we need to bring you back. And then the next question became, well, what happens to the immersions program now when our trips are international, our trips are domestic? The aim is to learn about different communities and their needs, but now we're online. So what do we do? And what ended up happening is our immersions assistant director here, Kike Basan, really made the immersions program into a leadership program for students, and a program where they could learn about the different needs of different communities around the world, interact with different Jesuit universities around the network, and learn about the current state of the world in that way, and find ways to respond together with the hopes of eventually coming back together and having immersions. And I'm happy to report that we just had an immersion to the border, and it was very successful. The other program, of course, liturgy and music. How do you take the liturgy, which demands an in-person presence, which I'm sure some of you probably had the same concern. So how do you take that and you transition into the online space? We were able to create liturgies of the word and have small communities that came together every Sunday night to have prayer and to socialize online. And so we tried our best to create that same atmosphere of welcome and community on the Zoomiverse. And we did our best, and we find that a lot of those students that connected there are still connecting now in person. The other question, of course, was, how do we build and maintain community? And that goes into the next question. If we're trying to maintain and build community, how are we also doing that with the incoming freshmen? So fall 2020, that was the concern. Normally, there's so much programming that goes around welcoming our freshman students or first years, making sure they connect with this activity and that activity and this program and that program. But in an online space, how do you do that? And how do you continue to engage them and bring them to the table, so to speak, and make sure they're coming through that virtual door? And so that was a challenge for us. And then, of course, how do we care and support our students during the complexity of the pandemic and the ongoing societal tensions that were happening in this country, but coupled with the very important question of how do you also care for those that are ministering to students? And I think that's a question we don't often ask, but the pandemic hit all of us. And so all of us experienced the isolation, the lockdowns, maybe the loneliness that came with that, the added stress of having to use new tools, and trying to just make sense of everything that was happening in the world. I know those of us here in California, the wildfires were happening during the pandemic as well. And so there was a lot for us to wrap our heads around. So one of the questions that we kept asking is, how do we, who are ministering to students, care for them and then care for ourselves in the process? It's like that, when you're on the plane and you put the mask on yourself first, right? And then you put it on someone else. It's that same question. How do we care for ourselves in order to continue to do the best for our students? Next slide, please. So I want to highlight a few programs that were extremely successful during the pandemic. And the very first one that I want to shout out and I want to lift up is Breaking Bread in the Binary. Out of all our programs at University Ministry, Breaking Bread in the Binary had a consistent group of students that met weekly and supported each other from wherever they were located, and eventually found time to meet in a very socially distanced way. But also, this program opened its doors to students from other universities who had found out about this community and did not have that same kind of community in their colleges or universities, and wanted a place. And so Breaking Bread in the Binary became that place for them, and a very strong community during the pandemic, and continues to be, of course. Of course, immersions, I talked about earlier, transitioned into really being a leadership program that that created leaders, not only here at USF, but we partnered with some colleges and universities in Europe, as well as Jesuit University in the Midwest as well, to have these conversations between students. And so much of it was also about, what is currently happening in the world aside from just COVID, because just because COVID came didn't mean that all the other world needs ended, right? They were still happening. So that was very successful. Our retreats program grew during the pandemic. We transitioned online, had self-care retreats, had retreats that focused on mindfulness, had retreats that focused on creativity, such as writing and art. Also retreats focused on body movement and discernment. And what we saw was an uptick in graduate students coming to our programs. That's a population that we haven't really focused on in the past several years, and the pandemic opened the door for them to be able to join us in a lot of our programming, and therefore open our door to more graduate students and to the possibility of more programming for them. Our liturgy program and our interfaith program, both of those programs continue to serve the needs of our students through prayer services, through online gatherings, opportunities for conversation, and opportunities to discuss the impact of COVID on faith, and what students were feeling. And as you can imagine, students were quite impacted by what was happening. And so they had a lot of questions, and a lot of those questions revolved around faith and doubt and response. And so giving them a space to talk about these issues and holding that space for them was very important. And we found that a lot of students came to us for those needs. And then we had an interfaith Passover Seder focused on climate justice. And again, this was a program put together by Rabbi Camille Angel, as well as one of our fabulous resident ministers. And it brought all of us together from different faith traditions. Some of you may have also attended as well. And it was just a beautiful gathering focused on climate justice, and an opportunity for all of us to really share our faith together at such an important time of the year. So we are very proud of what we were able to accomplish during the pandemic. And we are, continuing so many of these programs now when we are somewhat in person, but still using a lot of these online tools. Next slide, please. So this is the end of my presentation, but I invite all of you to visit us, University Ministry at USF. Feel free to email us with any questions, any ideas, or if you just want to stop on by and meet some of us, you are more than welcome here. Thank you so much.
Fred.
All right, good morning. I want to thank you, Michael, for the invitation, and I want to thank the San Francisco Interfaith Council for the invitation as well. I'm about to share my screen and get into my PowerPoint to talk about the work that we are doing at San Francisco State University. First, I'd like to introduce myself, Frederic Smith, he, him pronouns. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Equity and Community Inclusion at San Francisco State. And what I want to say first is that it takes a village to make the kind of work that we're doing at San Francisco State happen. So first, I'd like to give a huge thanks for the support of President Dr. Lynn Mahoney, Vice President of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, Dr. Jamila Moore, and then finally, the Director of Equity, of Diversity, Student Equity, and Interfaith Programs, Christian Lozano, who does the work with the students on the ground and is part of the larger team that does the interfaith programs work at San Francisco State. This is not solo work. It takes a full team, and it's always great to have support from all levels of the university for the type of work that we're doing. And so I'm coming here on behalf of the team from Equity and Community Inclusion at San Francisco State, which is part of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. Our work here is really about inclusion, community building, and making sure that students have a place where they belong. But not only students, we work with faculty and staff on the campus as well. So the roadmap, I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling about who I am. I'll introduce our work with the Division of Equity and Community Inclusion, how this fits into some of our larger campus climate work related to our interfaith programs unit, and then ways to contact us. And then we'll be doing questions and answers with you in just a moment. So first, just a little bit about me. I grew up in Detroit. I grew up in a Baptist household, and one of those every Sunday go to church kind of households. My first encounters with other beliefs and spiritualities was when I was in graduate school at Loyola University, Chicago, Jesuit University. And there I had wonderful learning opportunities and spiritual growth and connections with many of the Jesuits at the university. And then later in life, when I was pursuing my doctoral degree at Loyola Marymount University, where again, I had further opportunities to engage and think about the ways in which spirituality, faith, and belief shapes my moral and ethical leadership. And the program there at Loyola Marymount University was educational leadership for social justice. So a little bit about who we are at Equity and Community Inclusion. We are a relatively new area on the campus of San Francisco State, having been established in the 2017-2018 academic year. And I'm so excited to be part of this team. I joined San Francisco State in July 2019, so I'm relatively new to San Francisco State and to the Bay Area as well. So I welcome community building opportunities with all of you who are watching live or watching later. So a little bit about our spaces, our community, and how we build spaces of mattering. We really like to say that our motto in our area is that compassion and consciousness are our community values. And one of the ways that we illustrate this is by having spaces where people can connect with people who are like them and not like them on our campuses. So we have a series of resource centers that are open for the campus community, including an Asian American and Pacific Islander Student Services, Black Unity Center, a Latinx Student Center. We also have a Pride LGBTQ Student Life, a Dream AB 540 Resource Center, and then our most recent development in addition to our area as of 2019 is our Interfaith Programs Unit. And I'll be telling you more about what we do in that area in just a minute. Our team, like I shared, it's a team effort. It's not just me, I'm speaking, but it's all the people on the screen on the slide who do all the work. And they bring lots of skills related to campus climate work, community belonging, programming, identity development, facilitating difficult and easy conversations, and consulting with all parts of our campus. So academic affairs, student affairs, all of the divisions on campus around issues that are mattering to our students, staff, and faculty on the campus. So I couldn't do anything without the great people who are part of Equity and Community Inclusion at San Francisco State University. Our Interfaith Programs Unit, as I shared, was founded in fall 2019. And currently it is an umbrella programming focused unit for two specific areas right now, our Jewish student life and our Muslim student life and interfaith education areas. There are staff designated. I shared our director for diversity, student equity, and interfaith programs. There is a coordinator for Jewish student life and interfaith programs, and a coordinator for the Muslim student life and interfaith programs area. As well, in addition, as I shared before, our focus is not necessarily on ministering because we are a state and public university. So we are not about ministering, proselytizing, but really our focus is on student development issues, providing support for students who are of various identities, and providing educational programming and learning opportunities for students who identify as or with, and also for the larger campus community to explore, learn, and dialogue together. And that is what I think makes us so unique as the Equity and Community Inclusion team. And I have to share that we are the first among the Cal State University system to actively have an interfaith programs unit. And so I'm so happy and proud to be leading the way among the CSUs with a unit such as ours. So I'm going to take an umbrella picture back up. We provide a number of programs and events, as I shared, educational for the campus. In the 2021 academic year, when we were at the height of the pandemic, we offered about 219 offerings. Again, trying to keep campus connected during the pandemic, especially when we were 100% remote and all the time on Zoom. This year, as we transition back into hybrid model with on-campus programming and Zoom programming, we're on target to have provided 185 events and programs for the campus. Some of the examples that come from all of our resource centers include recognizing the designated months that happen throughout the academic year, self-love and care from various affinity groups, exploring issues such as the election and how people are impacted by the election. We do lots of mixers and welcome back to campus socials for people, whether it's virtual or in person. And then we have various identity mixers for our LGBTQ focus centers, and we provide, in partnership with the Cal State University system, opportunities for people to explore legal and immigration issues with a partnership that we have with a community organization through the Cal State system. Specifically with our Interfaith Programs Unit, and again, I'm so proud of the work that Christian Lozano Cuellar and the team that he has pulled together is doing around exploring educational programs for the campus. And so what you're going to see for the next few slides are some images of the types of programs that we have or are currently providing for our campus, again, to educate, to provide places for peaceful dialogue, and also for opportunities to ask questions that they may or may not have had opportunities to ask of people growing up. So programs including exploring the Muslim ban, what are ways that we hold ourselves sacred, which is a current series that's going on right now. Also exploring anti-Semitism with one of the preeminent scholars around anti-Semitism in college campuses, Dr. Deborah Lipstadt, who was on our campus, our Zoom campus, about a year ago. Other examples of where we try to bring people together to explore and educate include looking at some of the shared values among faiths, interfaith panels between Muslim and Jewish, and exploring relationships between those two communities, the impact of Islamophobia, and also questions about what is it like to live with faith? What is faith good for, etc. And so we really look at trying to provide educational opportunities for people to reflect and learn and connect with each other and with the community. Our social media is very active as well. And so our Instagram and Twitter pages always offering affirmation to people of various faiths and beliefs who are part of our campus community, as well as opportunities for, we've partnered with some community organizations that offer food vouchers for people who adhere to halal and kosher eating. And what I also wanted to mention, and I don't have a slide about that, is that we established the first non-denominational reflection room and prayer room at San Francisco State as well. It sits in the lower level of our Cesar Chavez Student Center, and that is a place where people of multiple faiths and beliefs can go to reflect, to pray, and just have some quiet moments together. So the work that we do with the Interfaith Programs Unit fits into some of the larger campus climate work that we do at San Francisco State University. So there is a larger umbrella campus climate advisory group that helps us decide and develop initiatives related to a number of areas and communities on our campus, including our ongoing development of Latinx student services for the campus, making sure that we are attentive to and developing initiatives for LGBTQ student life, men of color, making sure that we're addressing anti-AAPI hate on the campus, Black Lives at San Francisco State. We've developed a bias incident education team, which is a reporting portal for people to share their stories and experiences of bias on the campus. Of course, we are increasing our education around anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and how it impacts our campus community, as well as other areas that are important to our campus community. And so I have a couple more slides. If any of you are interested in connecting with us, we're most active on Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to take a picture of this slide right now. We'll also make sure that you get a copy of the slide deck following this presentation. But we're very active on our social media, and that's where you can connect with our team at Equity and Community Inclusion and Interfaith Programs and learn more about the work that we do. And then finally, I want to share some of our email addresses. If you'd like to further explore some of the work that we're doing at San Francisco State University, I invite you to connect with any of our staff members to learn more about the work that we're doing here. And so I am going to stop sharing slides right now. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I'm going to turn it back over to Michael Pappas.
Thank you so much, Fred. And the last thing you said is a great segue into where we're going, because we will be sending the recording link of this program to our 6,000 e-subscribers, and included in that will be your slide decks so that people will have access to the resources that you have shared. I would be remiss if I didn't thank both of you for your comprehensive presentations, but also to acknowledge the support that our Interfaith Council and the partnership we have with the presidents of both of your universities. I don't think Lynn Mahoney was here a week at San Francisco State before she invited the entire board of directors to come to lunch to introduce us to your team. And Paul Fitzgerald has just been an incredible leader, and we've worked especially on areas of interfaith essential housing with him. So thank you. And only because you raised her name and she's on this call, I have to give a big shout out to Rabbi Camille Angel, who I've known since her days at Shahar Zahav, and to congratulate her on the inaugural Al Baum lecture for the Swig Center for Jewish Studies. You know, Al was a friend of mine, and I'm just grateful that this program is going to benefit the community. I'm going to give you both an opportunity to go off script. And I'm going to give you both an opportunity to, as Frederic said, tell some stories. I'd like to start with a story on how my first encounter with San Francisco State. Back during the Great Recession, only because we got our start in homelessness as a council, the San Francisco Food Bank approached us. And they said, you know, people are hungry, and we're going to be setting up recession relief pantries along heavily traveled corridors in the city. And so they identified Temple United Methodist Church, which was in your neighborhood. And I will tell you, success story. Temple offered the facilities, but all of the students from the different university ministries volunteered, and we made the evening news. I guess in sharing this story, I want to ask you how it is, if you are at all, engaging with the greater communities and partnering with the greater communities, houses of worship. Because if you're not, that I feel like that's our fault, and we can help you with that. But I know that you are surrounded by congregations, and wondering if you're doing any service work with them.
All right, so you know, thank you again for sharing that success story, and I think it speaks to the spirit of San Francisco State, which is being connected with the local and larger Bay Area community. You know, I think that initial partnership that you talked about continues, but we're also looking at connecting with other areas as well. We're very closely connected with SF Hillel and with many of the people who came to that initial lunch when President Lynn Mahoney invited you. And I've stayed in touch with many of the people who participated in that lunch to further our connections, both for service and also for educational opportunities for our students. One of the more recent areas that we've been engaging local congregations has really been, people may or may not know about the CSU African American Initiative, which is an initiative really looking at how do we provide information about the CSU system, San Francisco State, and educational opportunities on our campus. And so we have engaged for many years through the CSU African American Initiative, which goes to churches on various Sundays throughout the academic year to connect with families and with students. And then we have a number of areas on our campus as well who are more focused on service, community service, who are doing outreach as well.
Angelica, you're welcome to respond as well.
Sure. So we have, of course, our partnerships with our affiliated ministries, but we do a lot with our Jewish students to make sure that we plug them into the local synagogues, especially for the high holidays and Shabbat. Of course, some of the congregations, Sharith Israel and Shahar Zahav, which you mentioned a few minutes ago. So we're doing outreach definitely there. We also do some work with Faithful Fools, which is plugged into different ministries around the city. Our food recovery network pre-pandemic was doing much of the work with them, going, I believe it was twice a week to serve food to the populations there in the Tenderloin. And of course, the pandemic changed that. And so there's a different iteration now, and hopefully in the next few months, it'll go back to where it was pre-pandemic. And of course, we are always finding ways to connect with different communities. One of our goals here in this office is to hopefully in the next academic year have a position for interfaith programs and religious diversity specifically, so that person will be charged to go out into the community and to continue to form partnerships with different congregations. I know there are several churches definitely in our area from different denominations, and we'd love to plug into that, but we need someone to go ahead and spearhead that in this office.
It was a leading question and also an invitation, because I know San Francisco State has in its backyard the San Francisco's great interfaith experiment on Brotherhood Way, with 7 houses of worship of different faiths and schools. And USF has in its backyard the historic First AME Zion Church, as well as St. Cyprian's. And we are glad to leverage our relationships so that you can engage with the greater community. I would say, looking at USF and our relationship with USF, I remember when I first began this position 15 years ago, I was so impressed because we were working with Julia Dowd on the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. And we co-hosted a luncheon at USF. And I remember there were students at every table. And they told us the first thing that we are asked when we come to this school is, how are we going to make the world a better place? And that so impressed me. And I know that we have worked with you all on issues from Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical on climate change, on civil rights and Black Lives Matter, on essential housing, and so many other social justice issues. I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about the work that the universities are doing and the ministries around issues of social justice, because they are in the DNA of our, of our faith communities.
Sure. So I want to highlight some of the work that we do, particularly here with our undocumented student population. For USF, as I'm sure San Francisco State, we have a high percentage of students that are undocumented. And so our office has really tried to make sure that we are in those conversations of how best to support students, whether that is academically, whether that is trying to find financial resources for them, or just be a place that is supportive, and making sure that we are making connections between students in that population and services within the city that can assist and support with the various needs. And so that is definitely one population. We also do much in the area of working with young kids within our social justice program. So our two tutoring programs really serve students in the Latinx community primarily, the Mission District of San Francisco, and as well as Half Moon Bay. And the goal is several-fold there, right? We are helping them academically. That is one thing, right, with tutoring. But the other piece of that is to engage and inspire students, many who will hopefully be first-generation college graduates in the future. But for them to be able to see our students here at USF and what they've been able to accomplish, and hope that they set those same goals for themselves in the future. And we are supporting a population that struggles socioeconomically, as well as families whose primary language might not be English. And so we step in and we minister in that way. And of course, we're always looking to the needs of the city and the needs of this world. So we do a lot in the area with immigrants and refugees, a lot with the Jesuit network, and whatever programs they have as well, connecting students in that way. So we're very tapped into various needs of the community.
Fred?
And just to build upon what Angelica said, our support and work with and for undocumented students at San Francisco State is high on our list, both as equity, community inclusion, and in our interfaith programs area. But in addition to that, one of the areas we're really looking at are really making sure that students who are growing up in San Francisco know that San Francisco State is an option for them educationally. And I'm really happy that recently we've been having conversations with Third Baptist around connecting our students with their students, both in terms of mentorship, in terms of tutoring, in terms of working with a music program that is at the church, as well as our ongoing Super Sunday work with that specific church. Because we really make sure that there's a cohort of students who know that this great university that's in the corner of the city is a space and a safe space for them to come to before they apply and enroll at San Francisco State, but to know that this is a safe space and there's a place to land in the city as well. And so I'm really excited about some of the ongoing work we'll be doing with Third Baptist this year and ongoing years, as well as some other opportunities that are in the works that are still being formulated right now.
Third Baptist is a historic congregation. Reverend Brown is a civil rights icon, and Reverend Jonathan Butler, who is the associate pastor there, is also the executive director of the African American Faith-Based Coalition. And I'm so glad to hear that he is working with you all. You all spoke, both of you spoke about the pandemic a little bit. When we started this programming, it was to help faith leaders respond to the pandemic and give them information. And I know that we have devoted programs to academics, in public education, K through 12. I'm just wondering if you can tell us some of the great challenges in a story form, and maybe give us an example that you had to respond to during the pandemic, that can paint a picture for us on how it is philosophically that you've taken the work that you're doing and made a difference in the lives of those you're serving.
I see we're both pausing and we're thinking about the story. What I can start out with is I think that, because the transition to 100% Zoom life was so quick and abrupt, but with a lot of planning at both of our universities, I think that for students, not knowing that we were going to be a full year of just interacting with a computer, I think that was quite, that was a lot for students. It was a lot for us as staff people as well, to know that we're trying to create community with a screen, but that the only person we're really seeing is ourselves in the screen, so to speak. And so as we come back to campus, one of our great opportunities is, there's a group of students, first years and second years, who did their senior years virtually and who have never really set foot or had a campus life. And so that's our big opportunity right now, is how do we reintroduce what could essentially be like 2 full years, 3 full years of people who are first-year students? And how do we create community for them? How do we create and set new norms outside of a Zoom screen, et cetera? And so that's been one of the wonderful opportunities, is thinking about creating a whole new campus for people who've never really set foot on a campus in 2.5 years.
So I agree with everything Fred said. And if I could think of a story sort of go along with that and the work that we do, prior to the pandemic, if there was a world event, we would be able to hold a space for students in person, right? We'd be able to unpack and process in that way. And in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, the question became, how do we provide that space for our students? How do we even begin these conversations and work towards the healing, and how do we bring our different faith traditions together? And so for us, the challenge was, how do we take the interfaith prayer services that we normally have in person, outdoors, or in a different space, in order to pray, right? And to just gather and be. And how do we move that to online and create a space that honors everyone who is present, not only in their tradition and their beliefs, but in their emotions, what they're feeling? How do we create something that's authentic? And so we did create a prayer service, and it was a prayer service that we realized online didn't need a lot of words. Normally we have speakers and, but it didn't need words. It just needed presence. And it needed an opportunity for people to reflect and to be able to share if they wanted to. So it became a mostly unscripted interfaith prayer service with music and a video where we brought forth the names of all those who have been victims, and being able to just be in a space with other folks and reflect on the moment and what was happening, and being able to process that together. And as difficult as you might think that might be online, which it is, I'm not saying it isn't, it worked, because I think what people were craving for was just to be in community and to be able to talk to other people about what was happening, and just sit in the moment and recognize we were all going through those emotions together in the midst of a pandemic where we really didn't know what was going to happen in the next week, in the next month, right, in the next year. So that's one story that I can think of where all we just had to do was just create a space.
Thank you. I want to be respectful of both of your times, as well as those who are in our viewing audience, but I do want to ask one final question. I've been on both of your campuses, and I have to tell you, Fred, about 12 years ago, I was invited to offer the invocation at commencement. I've never seen so many people, and it was just for a graduating class. It was, and Angelica, even though there's an intimacy at USF, I know that you're serving a great number of people. As one who is a staff of 2, and is seeking to serve 800 communities of faith and religious institutions, I know you have challenges. If you could dream dreams, and I'm going to give you permission to dream dreams right now for your programmatic work, and resources were not an issue, what would you dream for?
Oh, where is Paul?
He'll get this.
So I would dream for a bigger full-time staff, which would be one. We rely so much on our resident ministers, but they are a volunteer staff, and a lot is placed on them, and we are so appreciative of that. But we'd love a bigger full-time staff. And I have this dream of a multi-faith center on campus that can function. One day it could be turned into a place of Muslim prayer. One day it could be turned into a place for Jewish prayer, Buddhist, so on and so forth. Right now we have a meditation room. It's right next to our office. It is tiny. You can't have services in there, but you can go in there as a reflective space. But if I could dream those big dreams, it would be to have a room that could easily be converted, and that every faith tradition on campus feels free to reserve it, to use it, and for it to also be a place of education, so an extension of our office. So I would love that, and I hope Paul watches the recording.
Fred, Lynn's going to get the recording as well.
I know. And Angelica, everything you're dreaming, I echo that as well. One thing I often think about, especially at a state public university, is that although we are initiating these conversations around education, around various faiths and beliefs, I still think there's room for, someone like a chaplain, someone like a conflict mediator who can tailor and target into when things happen in the world and they impact students, to really go in and speak to students' specific beliefs and faiths, and really help work through some of those impacts, or I should say world events that impact students in ways that perhaps our counseling and psychological services can't, or ways that I can't, but in very unique and special ways that a chaplain can. And, having been a student at Loyola Chicago and Loyola Marymount, I know the value of having someone who is a non-denominational chaplain on a campus, who can speak to some of the spiritual questions and reflections in ways that we who are state employees often cannot.
Well, thank you both. And inviting you into this conversation, I'd invite you into a continued conversation with our council, and allow us to leverage our relationships to help support you and the students, because your ministries are critical, and they are on our radar, and we want to continue to work with you. We consider you both vital constituents of the Interfaith Council, and look forward to working with you in the future. I also want to say a very special thank you to Reverend Tova Green from the San Francisco Zen Center, and our chair, Nancy Nielsen, for opening us up in prayer, as well as to Cynthia Zambucas and Trey. Thank you for you and Diane of your team for leading us today, and you're in Bangkok, so I know technology works. Would like to also invite you all to join us on April 21st, Thursday morning at 8:30, when the San Francisco Department of Emergency Management will brief faith leaders on the city's Tenderloin Emergency Initiative. You're reading about it in the papers. This will be a a firsthand opportunity to hear from a Department of Emergency Management about their efforts, and we look forward to welcoming them. For those of you who are observing Ramadan, for those of you who are anticipating Passover and Easter, and any of the other observances that are happening during this sacred time, we wish you a blessed season, and may God bless you and keep you. That concludes today's program.